Thank you, Chairman Menendez and Ranking Member Risch. And I just want to open by saying how appreciative I am for your personal active engagement, to have a full committee hearing on this topic, to have clear and forceful public statements and active diplomacy from the administration, and your editorial jointly with the chairman of the House Foreign Affairs Committee was very forceful and very clear about the path forward and challenges Prime Minister Abe and the leadership of Ethiopia to take steps now to change course, and lays out what might happen if that is not the case. Ambassador Godek, great to see you again. I've enjoyed serving with you, knowing you for many years, and greatly appreciated the chance to travel to Ethiopia with you. And Ms. Charles, thank you for your service at USAID and your work to address the humanitarian crisis in Tigray. As has been remarked, I traveled to Ethiopia in March 18th to the 22nd as a personal emissary of our president to speak with Prime Minister Abe and to convey President Biden's grave concerns about the conflict in Tigray and other regional challenges, the GERD, Al-Fashaga border disputes, and the situation within Ethiopia, violence in other areas, but in particular, the humanitarian crisis in Tigray, the presence of Eritrean troops, the lack of accountability for human rights violations, and the urgent need for a ceasefire. And then 3 weeks ago, I traveled with fellow committee member Chris Van Hollen to Sudan, as well as to the UAE, and had very constructive meetings in Khartoum, but also visited the Kuba refugee camp at the eastern border of Sudan, a refugee camp filled overwhelmingly by Tigrayan refugees, and heard firsthand about the horrors this conflict has inflicted on the Ethiopian people. Now in its 7th month, this conflict is estimated to have killed thousands and left as many as 6 million in desperate need of aid. And as we've heard from the witnesses, rape and other forms of sexual violence are widespread and systematic. And after months of intense diplomatic efforts, I support the Biden administration's decision to apply visa restrictions on all who are fueling the violence in Tigray. So, Ambassador, I want to talk, if I can, with you about the status of Ethiopia's transition. Many of us were very encouraged by Prime Minister Abe's initial rise and initial opening of space for civil society, the release of political prisoners, the allowing of banned political parties to participate. And his rise to power was facilitated by years of widespread protests against government policies and brutal repression. He shared an inspiring vision of Ethiopia that inspired people in his country and around the world. But the protest movement that largely brought him to power was led by young men in Oromia, many of whom are now in prison or who have joined armed groups. How would you assess Prime Minister Abe's vision of the transition compared with its current reality on the ground?
Thank you, Senator, and it's a pleasure to see you again as well. We certainly share the view that when Prime Minister Abe came to power, he presented a vision that was attractive and hopeful, of opening up the country, of expanding democracy, of giving people more rights. Unfortunately, the implementation of that has not met, I think, all of the hopes. We're deeply concerned about the closing of the political space, the reality that many politicians have been arrested, some are in prison, that there have been, there was some opening of the media, that there continues to be significant issues with reporters being jailed, international reporters such as Simon Marks being expelled from the country. There are significant issues in the implementation of this vision, which is why we believe at this point the only path forward is an inclusive dialogue that involves all the parties. This election, which is sure to take place, is one thing, but we need the dialogue to make progress. 2
more questions, if I might, given my limited time. Ms. Charles, in your assessment, is the humanitarian situation in Tigray getting better or worse? And are Ethiopian authorities becoming better or worse partners in addressing the ongoing humanitarian crisis?
First of all, thank you for your continued engagement on this and your travel in March. I think after your visit and high-level engagement from others in the administration, we did see some progress, including the lifting of regulations that required our partners to get permission to travel in Tigray. But we continue to see access restrictions from the government, critically around visas and importation of communication equipment that is necessary for our partners to scale and maintain operations in a very insecure environment.
Thank you. Last question. Ambassador Godek, in March, I met a prime minister who was charismatic and compelling, who had a forceful vision, and who reassured me, made a commitment to me and to our president that Eritrean troops would leave Ethiopia and Tigray. And in fact, he promptly flew to Asmara, met with Isaias, and said that he had demanded that Eritrean troops leave. It is now nearly June, and there's been no progress I'm aware of towards meeting that commitment. And reports just broke this week that jointly Eritrean and Ethiopian soldiers have forcibly rounded up and detained more than 500 young men and women from IDP camps in the area of Shire. What's your assessment of how closely Ethiopian and Eritrean security forces are coordinating, and what accountability would you expect if those detained folks are harmed and not released?
Our assessment, Senator, is that the Ethiopian and Eritrean forces are cooperating very closely up in Tigray, and it is obviously a source of serious concern. This latest report that people were detained, IDPs were detained, is extremely grave. We have already raised this with the Ethiopian government. The UN has raised it with them. Obviously, this, if these folks are harmed, if these individuals are harmed, it's unacceptable. It's absolutely unacceptable. And you know, we will continue to be very forceful on this point.
Mr. Chairman, your editorial lays out a clear series of next steps that might well be taken if this situation continues to deteriorate. It is my real hope that Prime Minister Abe will yet hear the offers of the world community in the United States to work together to declare a ceasefire, to resolve the humanitarian crisis, to deliver accountability for crimes against humanity that have been committed by a range of parties, and step back from a conflict that I think threatens the entire future of Ethiopia. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, and thank you for your good work in this regard. Senator Murphy.